I get it. The New Orleans Saints aren't the most interesting team in the NFL, but they deserved at least one primetime game. We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, I'm going to give you my way too early final record predictions for the New Orleans Saints now that the 2025 NFL schedule has been released. We'll take a look at some of the other big takeaways, including barely a cold weather game and no extensive road trips. Take a look at the pitfalls and some of the good things about the New Orleans Saints schedule. It's actually the perfect schedule for a team, just maybe not the New Orleans Saints. And we'll get everything started today with a look at the Saints getting no primetime games, even though they should have at least gotten one, in my opinion. I'll tell you why as we get started with today's episode. We appreciate you very much, as always, whether it's your first time or your next time, being here with us this time, making us your first listen, and being it every day or here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The New Orleans Saints deserved at least one primetime game this season. And let me explain to you why. I actually don't think that it's a bad thing that they didn't get any primetime games, but I think that they deserved at least one. Here's why. In my opinion, when you give a team no primetime games, this is the first time for the New Orleans Saints since the year 2000. There are only 3 teams that don't have primetime games this year. It's the Saints, the Cleveland Browns, the Tennessee Titans. If you ask me, for different reasons, all 3 of those teams deserved at least a pity Thursday night game. When you don't give a team a primetime game, you're saying that they are uninteresting. When you don't give a team a primetime game, you're saying that they don't have intrigue. And I understand that maybe from a larger population of general NFL fans, maybe the Saints don't bring a big draw, everything like that. But consistently, the city of New Orleans has constantly been at the top of primetime NFL game viewership per capita. We see it all the time with this graphic, this network, that network, that the city of New Orleans and the area of the Gulf Coast always towards the top because we love football in this area. And so for New Orleans, it felt like, well, they're going to at least throw them a bone and give them like the Thursday night game that almost every NFL team plays. But instead, the Saints end up as one of the 3 teams without even a Thursday night game. To me, and I'm going to get to the positives of not having primetime games and stuff like that here in a moment, because there are some positives to it. But to me, the NFL gave a less interesting New Orleans Saints team 3 primetime games last year, a Thursday night game and 2 Monday night football games. 2 Monday night football games for the 2024 New Orleans Saints, who in my opinion, inarguably, were less interesting at the schedule release ahead of the 2024 season than this New Orleans Saints team is interesting at the schedule release ahead of the 2025 season. New head coach, which includes a head coach, of course, that just won a Super Bowl last season as an offensive coordinator of the Philadelphia Eagles. New quarterback, young quarterback that will be taking the reins going for the New Orleans Saints here in 2025, whether it's Tyler Shough, whether it's Spencer Rattler, in any case, young quarterback, lots of intrigue there, new system, new identity, the potential for the revitalization of one of the most successful franchises in the NFL since 2006. Like this, to me, is an interesting and an intriguing team. And you might be saying, oh, Ross, that's foolish. You're being too optimistic, all those other things. I'm not saying they're going to win that game. I'm just saying that they deserved at least one primetime spotlight. Now, they might still get it. If the Saints are a better team than you and I might think that they are, by the time that they get to the end of the season, into the flex scheduling portion of the year and the schedule of all that, then maybe they get flexed into a primetime game at that point. It can totally still happen. We don't even know the date and time yet of the Saints and Falcons game that closes the season in Week 18. If one of those teams or if both of those teams are on the brink of playoff potential and that game actually means something for both teams, then all of a sudden that game could potentially be flexed. Or if it's a spoiler opportunity for the New Orleans Saints going up against an Atlanta team that is one win away from going to the playoffs, that could be a primetime game, whatever it might be. I don't think that the Saints are going to be competing for the playoffs this year, but they certainly could stand in somebody else's way. And we've seen that dominate primetime in divisional matchups before. Everybody remembers the Detroit Lions and Green Bay Packers game, in which the Detroit Lions played spoiler that year to the Green Bay Packers. So there's a lot of different ways for that to go, but I do believe that this team is more interesting at this point than last year's team. And I do believe that the Tennessee Titans, who have the number 1 overall pick in the NFL as a quarterback in Cam Ward, that's going to be their quarterback in 2025, I thought they deserved a primetime game. I thought that the Shedeur Sanders pick for Cleveland was going to make them a shoe-in for a primetime game. I thought that all 3 of these teams that didn't end up with any primetime matchups would end up with a primetime matchup. And so that's my stance on it. I get it. I just don't agree with it. That's all that it is. Now, look, not having primetime games is not a bad thing for the New Orleans Saints. They're going to play every Sunday, maybe a Saturday at the end of the season by the time that Week 18 game rolls around. But they're going to play every Sunday. They're going to be able to get into a rhythm. There's nothing weird about their schedule. Like last year, they played 3 games in 13 days. So to go from that to this, fine. That's a good thing, especially with a roster full of young guys that end up getting an opportunity to get into a rhythm, work Monday or Wednesday through Saturday, recovery on Monday and Tuesday, but then like Wednesday through Saturday, getting ready for the Sunday game. You're constantly playing at noon. Every now and then you have some of those afternoon kickoffs. You have some standalone kickoffs as well, 325 games and everything. So you have some national games, quote unquote, but not necessarily any of those, primetime games or anything like that. Nothing that puts them in a spotlight like an international game either. And so because of that, I think that also gives your young roster or your young roster in progress, a little bit of a break in a way, right? Not so much pressure, a little bit of relief. Don't have to perform under the lights of a primetime game when Monday Night Football eyes are on you, Thursday Night Football eyes are on you, things like that. You can kind of just get into the rhythm of playing to your local audience and going out there and performing for your local team. I think that there is something positive to that for sure. I completely get the value of all of that. So I'm not complaining that the Saints should get a primetime game or anything like that. I'm just shocked that they didn't get at least one with all of the intrigue, everything like that. And especially because this team, again, to me, inarguably is far more interesting than last year's team at this point in the season of the schedule release. So I'm just surprised, but I do think that there's actual benefit for it, especially when you're moving ahead with a young quarterback and all those other pieces. The Saints are not the primetime team that they once were. They're under a new regime now, so maybe they can develop that over time, but we'll have to wait and see if they are able to develop that. One of the other things that I really like about this New Orleans Saints schedule is that they don't have a bye week until week 11. And so you really get an opportunity to get in rhythm over the course of the year. If you surprise and steal some wins that we don't expect them to steal early, then they hit that bye week, then all of a sudden the back end of their schedule becomes really, really intriguing. And so there could be the opportunity for those flex matchups towards the end of the year. I just don't really anticipate that being the case for this New Orleans Saints team. So we'll see where things go. But man, I thought that they would at least get one. I thought that they would at least get one again. First time in 25 years that the New Orleans Saints have not had a primetime game. We'll see if that holds all throughout. And then now I'm curious. We'll see how much longer it takes them to get another primetime game. I don't think it'll take that long. I think they'll have one in 2026. We certainly believe that they'll have an international game. Many of us believe that they'll be playing in Paris in 2026. So there'll be something about that as an international game, as a kind of standalone national situation. So there will always be that. But I don't know, just interesting. Again, there's value to it. So I don't think it's the end of the world. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, but just a little bit surprised. Coming up next, this New Orleans Saints schedule is honestly perfect. Just maybe not for the New Orleans Saints. I'll explain what I mean when we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. The NBA playoffs are in full swing. Surprise after surprise after surprise there. If you want to get in on any of that action, FanDuel is absolutely the best place to do so. They make it easy for you to be able to stay in the game, whether you get in before tip-off or you're checking in live. You can dive into stuff like player performance trends, as well as same-game parlays, player props, and much more. And if you're new to FanDuel, you can go over to FanDuel right now. It's the perfect time to get in. You can head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet and get $200 in bonus bets if that $5 bet wins. You can then take that $200 in bonus bets and use it on other stuff with the NFL season on the way. The schedule's out. The New Orleans Saints, you can go over under 3.5, 5.5, and 7.5 wins in terms of their total, their win totals. Take your pick in terms of all those. Let me know what you think. You can find all that over at FanDuel today. That's FanDuel.com, where you can make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partners of the NBA. All right, family. The New Orleans Saints might have just gotten one of the perfect NFL schedules. However, it's not perfect for the New Orleans Saints themselves. If your team was a 10 or 11 win team, maybe not last year, but maybe they dealt with injuries and because of that, they took a step back, whereas last year they kind of looked like they just kind of stayed where they were, even with all the injuries. You judge them from 2023 to 2024, whatever it might be. But like, if your team was really good, stacked roster, all these other things, and then you just had a bad roll of the dice a few times and you ended up with a losing record in 2024, and then you came into 2025, this is the schedule you would want for that team. That's a contender, even though they felt like they didn't necessarily perform in 2024. I don't think the Saints are in that category is the problem. But if your team, if the Saints were that team where they were a bona fide contender that just had a bad year, this is exactly the schedule that you would want. I'm not even going to dive into strength of schedule because I think strength of schedule is, to be completely frank, useless. I think it's a worthless thing to even look at. What a team did the year before is not indicative of what it's about to do. What a team did in the offseason isn't indicative of what it's about to do. And so all of these people that try to do these like adjusted versions of strength of schedule are giving you equally worthless information. None of it matters because you can walk into training camp, lose your starting quarterback, and then bang, everything's different. You could walk into week one and all of a sudden everything clicks. You're a great team and bang, everything's different, right? We saw that with the New Orleans Saints last year. Started off hot for 2 games and then went on a 7-game skid after that. You never know, right? So I'm not even going to dive into strength of schedule. But when you look at the rest of this schedule, there are a lot of elements of this that make it a really, really favorable one. You don't play any of your division games until week 8. And in the last 10 weeks of your season, 6 of them are divisional games. You're going up against familiar opponents. There's something to be said about that. You're going up against the teams that you build your roster to compete with, to beat, to play against, all of that, to match up with. The Saints also have no extended road trips in this schedule. Look at the schedule. At most, they spend 2 weeks on the road at the time. Even if you factor in the bye week at one point, it goes away game, bye week, and then they're back at home. So it's not an extended road trip. There are some teams in the NFL that play like 2 away games, go on a bye week, come back, play 2 more away games, and don't play in front of their home audience for an entire calendar month. It happens to the Raiders like all the time. It's an excellent situation for New Orleans in terms of travel. Now, they have a couple of tricky moments to where they go from New Orleans to Seattle, back to New Orleans, and they go to Buffalo. But then there's a whole week in between that time, right? You're used to traveling like that. That's okay. But you're not doing a situation to where you're going from New Orleans to Seattle, back home to New Orleans, to Buffalo, back home to New Orleans, then out to, LA, and then back home and then out to Chicago. Like, it's not a situation where you have 4 road games or 3 road games in a row. The Saints have managed to avoid, with these NFL schedules, no 3-game road trips for, it feels like a couple of years now. And so they've had sort of these spurts of pairs of away games, which is great. And so that's where the Saints are, again, just pairs of road games, no big time road trips, which I think is really good. Like I said, they'll have that tricky situation in week 3 and 4 to where they go to Seattle, which is their only 2,000 plus mile air travel situation. So go from New Orleans to Seattle, come back to New Orleans, and they'll go to Buffalo. But that's weeks 3 and 4. Everyone's kind of rejuvenated and still probably feeling good, at least as well as they can at that point. And so it's not the same as if you were doing that in like week 13 when everybody's been beaten up for, 12 matchups and everything like that, 11, 12 games. At least it's not that. The Saints also don't have really but barely a cold weather game. Barely a cold weather game. Like those games in Seattle and Buffalo being in week 3 and week 4 is clutch for New Orleans. Because those are games where you could absolutely end up having to go and play in some horrid situations, especially Buffalo. Like if you were playing against Buffalo in week 15, 16, 17, or 18, good night. Like that is done. I might not even travel for that game if that was the case. I might stay home because I'll be too dang cold. But they avoid that. They get both those teams in September, which is excellent. Then The only road games, that they play November and December are Miami, Tampa. Then they end the season in a dome against Atlanta. The only road game, week 17, that could potentially be troublesome for them from a cold weather perspective is Tennessee. Nashville at the end of December. Last year, the Titans hosted the Houston Texans week 18 in Nashville at Nissan Stadium, and that was 35 degrees. The year before that, they hosted Jacksonville to close out the season in January, week 18, and that one was 41 degrees. That's not bad. You can deal with that if you're New Orleans, right? You could deal with that. And I do think that the cold weather thing kind of gets overplayed. Like so many of these guys, like, you've got people that are coming in from Louisville, Kentucky that have played in some cold situations, whether they're traveling to games or just playing in Louisville. Like, there's winter in Louisville. Like, you have a lot of guys that have dealt with that. Even guys that are coming from Big 10, Big 12, having to travel to other places, even if they play in the southern areas, having to or sunnier areas, having to travel to play those cold weather games. Like, they're used to that. I think that football players don't get enough credit for where they played in college and how that helps them acclimate to what they can do throughout their entire NFL career. Lance Moore spoke a little bit about that in the Saint Squad show this morning. We were talking about road games and bad conditions and winter games and stuff like that. And Lance grew up in Columbus, Ohio, and played football at Toledo. Like, he played in cold weather conditions. Drew Brees played at Purdue, played in cold weather conditions and all those other things. And I don't think we give football players, NFL players, enough, not respect, but like enough credit for like the weathering that they go through, the seasoning that they go through when it comes to cold weather games throughout their collegiate careers, and how they could potentially help them when it comes to their NFL careers as well. So I look at that as being something, though, that's still a benefit for New Orleans, that they don't have to deal with any of those winter games. They don't have to deal with that kind of stuff. And I do think that that ends up helping. I mentioned the late bye week, which I think is really helpful. But beyond that, as a part of not having any primetime games, you also have no short weeks. You don't have to come off of a Sunday game and then get ready for, a Thursday night game the next week. You don't have to do any of those things. Now, the bad news for that is that you don't get the mini bye that comes with a Thursday night game, but I think you'll take that exchange, right? You don't have the mini bye, but you also don't have to deal with the short week at all and everything. And so I think that that's a bit of a benefit too. Like I said, New Orleans came off of a season last year where they had to play, what was it, 3 games in 13 days or whatever it was. And like Bub Means talked about that at the end of the season. Spencer Rattler talked about that during the season and how challenging that is, and how like you have to make that kind of the shift you have to make from college to the pros in terms of dealing with little weird schedule quirks like that. So at least they don't have to deal with those kinds of things as well. And they get a couple of revenge moments throughout this season as well. They travel to Chicago to take on Dennis Allen's defense. That's going to be a big game. We'll discuss that a little bit more here in just a moment. You also get Kellen Moore and Brandon Staley headed to Los Angeles, and Brandon Staley in the regular season goes up against his former team, the Los Angeles Rams, where he was last defensive coordinator in 2020. During the preseason, the Saints will head over to the Los Angeles Chargers early on. So Kellen Moore gets to go back out there where he and Brandon Staley both coached in 2023. And I think that preseason game gives you a pretty good indication that the Saints will probably do joint practices in Los Angeles as a part of their preseason prep. So I would expect that to be the case as well. All right, let's get to the schedule predictions. I don't think that the New Orleans Saints are going to be a playoff team in 2025. So let me break things down for you game by game. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. I don't think it'll take anybody by surprise to hear that I don't necessarily think the New Orleans Saints are going to be a playoff team in 2025. I've been pretty adamant about that for some time. And so what I want to do now is roll through game by game and give you my predictions for each one. We'll go through this pretty quick, but I wanted to make sure you walked away with some prediction when it comes to how I think that this Saints season is going to go. So I'll tell you right now, I have the New Orleans Saints going. And again, if you're an everydayer, this is no surprise. I have the New Orleans Saints going 6 of 11. So I'm going over on the 3.5 for FanDuel. I'm going over on the 5.5 for FanDuel, but I'm going under on the 7.5 for FanDuel. Now, I did this last year and people got mad at me and then said that I was way too low on the Saints, and they finished with 5 wins. So let's just wait and see how this all goes. So let's go game by game here and then take a look at where I think the Saints will get their wins and where I think that the Saints will get their losses. So they open up the season September 7th on Sunday up against the Arizona Cardinals. Kyler Murray, James Conner, Marvin Harrison Jr., good offense, made some improvements over on defense, the Arizona Cardinals did. I think the Saints will struggle coming out of the gate this season. They'll go back to their old ways when they were trying to get like their system right and get everything ready, get a little bit of a punch in the throat earlier on in the season. That's okay. So I got the New Orleans Saints losing this game up against the Arizona Cardinals. They are currently, according to our friends over at FanDuel, 4.5-point underdogs for that game. We'll see how that tracks as we get closer. Now, listen, I reserve my right to change my mind a million times before the season begins because we don't know what any of these rosters look like or anything like that. But I don't think that the Arizona Cardinals are where the New Orleans Saints get their first win. I think Arizona is better than people think that they are. I think that they are better than the New Orleans Saints' next opponent, which will also be at home September 14th, going up against the San Francisco 49ers. But I don't think that the Saints are better than where the 49ers will be. I expect the 49ers to take a step back. I don't think Christian McCaffrey's got a ton left. They moved on from Deebo Samuel. They might end up moving a guy as well, like Brandon Ayuk. They've added some pieces and everything like that. I get it, but it feels like they've lost more, and they were not a good team last year. I don't think they're going to be a very good team this year, but I don't think that the Saints are going to be better. I think that while San Francisco is going to be a middle of the pack team, I think New Orleans is going to be a bottom of the pack team. So I give the win to San Francisco. I'm just going to tell you right now, I also don't have the Saints going on the road to Seattle and winning. I don't have them going on the road to Buffalo and win. So I have them starting 0-4, and that's okay. Like the measure of success for the New Orleans Saints season this year is not what their final record is. Instead, it's going to be all about how they look as a team throughout and how they grow throughout the season. So they can start off 0-4. I'll feel the exact same way about them then as I would feel if they would have started 2-0. Because if they start 2-0, I'm still not believing. The New York Giants is where I think they get their first win, 1-4. That'll come in week 5. That'll be at home, October 5th. I think the New Orleans Saints get their win against the New York Giants. I said in yesterday's episode, I don't believe in Russell Wilson. I think Jameis Winston or Jackson Dart will eventually quickly become the starter. I think the Giants are going to be very happy to pull the trigger on that. I don't think they're going to like what they're going to see out of Russell Wilson. I don't think New York has made many strides over the course of this offseason until they get everything right and set up for their young quarterback. I think the Saints could be the better team by that point. You had 4 weeks. You got punched in the mouth 4 times. You got an opportunity for you to let everything sink in, get your new offensive system, get your new defensive system. I have the New Orleans Saints winning that game against the Giants. So losses for the first 4 weeks, but then they get back on track against the Giants. New England's a toss-up for me. New England comes to town on October 12th. That one's a toss-up for me. I'm going to say loss for right now, but that could be the difference between 6 and 7 wins for me because I think Mike Vrabel is going to have that team ready to go, but I don't know what the team is that he's going to have necessarily. So we'll see where things head there, but I do think that that is a game that I would actually call kind of a toss-up. On the road against the Chicago Bears, week 7, I have the Saints winning that game. You can't lose that game. You cannot fire Dennis Allen, hire the offensive mastermind in Kellen Moore, go to Detroit, and then have Kellen Moore's offense lose to Dennis Allen's defense. You gotta pull fire alarms. You gotta unscrew seats in the stands. You gotta do whatever it is that's gonna distract this team enough to make sure that you're able to go out there and win this football game. I think you have to get a win here against Chicago. So I'm putting that down as a win for the New Orleans Saints. So that's 2 wins over the course of those first 7 weeks, 2 and 5. Tampa, I have as a loss. I haven't gone on a little bit of a losing streak here. Tampa, at Los Angeles, at Carolina, losses for me. Tampa coming to town. Tampa's the better team. The Los Angeles Rams, the better team. And I think that they got better than they were last season, adding Devontae Adams, doing all the things that they've done. I have them losing that game on the road. And then Carolina at Carolina, those games are always weird for New Orleans. So I'm going to call that one a loss, but I do think that they end up actually splitting the series there. Then they go into their bye week. So they're going into their bye week after 10 games, 2-8. Come out of the bye week, refreshed, recharged, going up against the Atlanta Falcons at home. A lot of energy there. I'm going to give the New Orleans Saints the win there. I think that they split with the Atlanta Falcons. So then they improved to 3-8 in that situation. On the road, lost to Miami. On the road, lost to Tampa. back at home up against Carolina. That's where they get their win against Carolina. So they split with Atlanta. They split with Carolina. They're swept by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think the Bucs are just simply the better team. Then they welcome the New York Jets. Justin Fields led New York Jets. Maybe by that point in the season, week 16, I think that the Saints get another win there. So that is their 5th win of the season, wins against the Giants, the Bears, the Falcons, the Panthers, as well as the Jets. So that is through 16 weeks. So they're sitting there at 5 and 10, 5 and 11, 5 and 10, 5 and 10. And then they end up having their game up against the Tennessee Titans. I'm going to give that one a win. That's going to be a road win for them, a rare road win on this schedule for me. I think that that's a dub for them. I think that they're going to be the better team than the Tennessee Titans. I love that they got Cam Ward, but I don't think that they have enough around Cam Ward just yet. And that late in the season, I think the Saints are finally starting to get their momentum. This is where you start to see a little bit of a trend upwards. So I'm going to give Saints that win on the road up against Tennessee. And then finally, as they sit here 6 and 10, going up against the Atlanta Falcons, I'm charting that one as a loss for right now, but we'll see. We'll see what Atlanta looks like. That's one that I, again, reserve my judgment to change on based upon the situations there. But I'm going to give it a split in the division right now between the Saints and the Falcons. And so that gets them to 6 and 11. So that's the way that I see it. Losses to the Cardinals, Niners, Seahawks, and Bills to start the season. Then they get their first win up against the New York Giants. Then they're back at home against the New England Patriots. That one's a toss-up. I'm going to call it a loss for now. Then they have a win against the Bears because you got to go and beat Dennis Allen. Then you've got losses to the Bucs, Rams, and Panthers ahead of the bye week. Come back refreshed off the bye week with a win up against the Falcons. Losses to Miami and Tampa, both of those late-season Florida games. Back on track with a win up against Carolina and against the New York Jets. Both of those teams at home, weeks 15 and 16. A little bit of a win streak there, 2 games in a row. And then another win streak, or they extend that win streak with a win against the Tennessee Titans on the road, and then finish up the season with a loss against the Atlanta Falcons. That makes them 6 and 11 for the season with a potential win, 7th win, up against the New England Patriots. But I don't think that this team soars above 7 wins. I'm taking the under over at FanDuel of 7.5. I'm getting my tickets to these games with Game Time. You should, at least. And then that's the way I think that this season ends for the New Orleans. 6 and 11. Perfectly respectable, staying in the game, looking good in terms of their identity, and being able to show that winning for them right now in 2025 isn't about the regular season, but 6 and 11 is where I have them finishing up. And then we'll see. We'll revisit this again right after training camp and after those rosters are set. Coming up in tomorrow's episode, I want to dive more into the New Orleans Saints schedule, dive into some more of the nuances, and I want to tell you why the idea of trading for Trey Hendrickson makes absolutely no sense for the Saints. We'll get to that in tomorrow's show. We appreciate you very much as always. Make it as a part of your day, part of your routine for saying yes to me on the show. If you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation, I'll holla at you.